The sound of roaring winds filled the air as the dust storm settled over the battlefield. The clash of advanced alien technology and the stubborn will of humanity had left the earth scorched and cracked. Yet, standing tall amidst the wreckage, a towering figure made her presence known. She was Kyra, a woman of immense strength and power, a warlord of the Dominion, a species known for their fierce conquest of countless planets. Her armor shimmered with alien technology, its metal plating engraved with ancient symbols that glowed faintly under the pale sun. She was a sight to behold. Every inch of her exuded authority. Her long, silver hair flowed like liquid mercury, and her piercing green eyes scanned the horizon. Her expression was unreadable, as if no one on this planet could possibly challenge her. Zara had been on countless worlds, leading her forces to victory after victory. Fear was her weapon, and she wielded it with precision. She had seen entire civilizations collapse before her might, watching as their leaders surrendered without a fight, their populations bowing before her. She had made them all kneel. There was no one who dared to stand against her. But this world, Earth, was different. The humans, despite all their flaws, refused to yield. Though they were clearly outmatched, they fought with a determination that Kyra found strange. Earth wasn't like the other worlds she had conquered. The humans didn't quake in fear. In fact, many of them fought back with a courage that confused her. Today, Kyra was here with a simple mission: to intimidate the last of Earth's resistance into surrender. A lone human diplomat had been sent to negotiate, or at least to try and buy some time before the final blow was delivered. Kyra was not here for talks. She was here to prove a point. Standing on the edge of the crumbled city, Kyra saw the human she had been sent to meet. He was nothing special. Average height, ordinary clothes. He was unarmed, and yet he stood with an air of calm that Kyra had never seen before. Most humans would have trembled in the face of her power, pleading for mercy. But this one, this Daniel, merely stood still, watching her approach. The moment she was within speaking distance, Kyra spoke, her voice deep and commanding. "Everyone is afraid of me. But why aren't you afraid of me, human?" She expected him to flinch, to fall to his knees, or to beg for his life. That was the usual response when she encountered those weaker than her. But Daniel did not flinch. He did not bow. He simply looked at her. Daniel's eyes were steady, as if he had seen something far more dangerous than her in his life. "Why would I be afraid?" he asked, his voice calm, without the slightest tremor. Kyra was stunned. Her sharp, alien features tightened into a frown as she studied him. This man, this human, didn't fear her. He wasn't running. He wasn't screaming. There was no sign of fear in his posture or in his eyes. "Do you understand who I am?" she asked. "I am Kyra of the Dominion, a warlord. I have destroyed civilizations. I have crushed armies. I have wiped out entire species. You should fear me." Daniel's lips quirked slightly, but there was no sign of panic in his expression. "I don't fear you," he said again, his voice quiet but firm. "You're not the worst thing I've seen." Kyra was perplexed. No one had ever spoken to her this way. Every creature she had met knew who she was. They feared her. The very idea that someone could look her in the eye without trembling was unsettling. She took a step closer, trying to gauge his resolve. "And what makes you think you can stand before me without fear?" Her voice grew colder, but still Daniel stood unmoving, almost as if he were challenging her to do something. "I don't have to fear you," he said simply. "I'm not afraid of power. I'm afraid of what happens when we forget what really matters." Kyra's mind raced as she tried to understand what he meant. She had never thought about power in those terms. She had always believed in strength, in victory, in domination. To her, fear was a tool, and she had used it well. But Daniel, he wasn't afraid of her. He was somehow unaffected by her power. This human, this strange man who refused to cower in front of her, was unlike any enemy she had ever faced. And for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crept into Xira's mind. Xira stood there, staring at Daniel, trying to make sense of his calmness. She had seen fear in the eyes of kings, generals, and entire armies, but this human was different. He wasn't scared. No, he was curious. That was something Xira had never encountered before. She had expected him to beg, to cry for mercy, to do anything that showed weakness. But instead, he stood his ground, as if there was no reason to be afraid. Xira's green eyes narrowed. "You still haven't answered me," she said, her voice colder than before. "You should be trembling by now. You should be begging for your life. Yet here you are, calm as if I were nothing more than a shadow." Daniel didn't flinch. He took a small step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm not afraid of shadows," he said, his tone soft but firm. "I'm not afraid of what's in front of me, what's inside of me. That's what I fear. That's what we should fear, the things we choose to become." Xira blinked. The words struck her like a sudden thunderclap, loud and confusing. She had spent so much of her life focused on others' fear, on their submission to her will, that she had never truly thought about her own fear. What was it that drove her? Why did she feel the need to control? Was it power? Was it survival? She shook her head slightly, trying to dismiss the unsettling thoughts that began to creep into her mind. "You talk like a philosopher," she said with a sharp tone. "We are not here for speeches. You're here to negotiate, human, and your people are losing. Your time is running out." Daniel didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked at her with a soft expression, as if he were seeing something that Xira herself couldn't. "You might think I'm here to talk about surrender. Maybe you think I'm going to beg for my people's lives. But that's not what I came here for." Xira tilted her head, intrigued despite herself. "Then why are you here?" Daniel's eyes grew serious, but there was no fear in them. "I came here because I believe in something bigger than fear. I believe in the possibility of change. In the possibility that even someone like you, Xira, can understand that there's more to life than power and control." Xira's mind raced. She had seen power used to control, to break enemies into submission, but she had never thought of it as something that could be challenged. No one ever challenged her. She was the conqueror, the one who brought planets to their knees. But this human, this man who had never backed down, who had never shown the slightest sign of fear, he was doing something far more dangerous than simply resisting her. He was questioning her. Xira's chest tightened as a strange feeling began to form in her mind. For the first time in a long while, she wondered if she was the one who had been wrong. Could it be possible? Could she have misunderstood everything she had done, everything she had believed in? She had always thought fear was the key to control, to winning. Yet Daniel stood here, unshaken and without fear. She crossed her arms, standing tall before him, trying to regain her composure. "If you truly believe in change, human, then why don't you show me your strength?" she asked, her voice still cold but less certain than before. "Words are meaningless. Strength is what matters. Strength is what will keep your species alive. If you want to change things, show me that you have the strength to back it up." Daniel didn't hesitate. His expression grew even more focused, more intense. "I don't need weapons to prove strength," he said. "Strength comes from standing your ground, even when you're outmatched. It comes from not giving up, even when everything seems impossible." Xira's eyes narrowed. She had heard these kinds of words from lesser beings before, and they had always been weak, empty promises. But this human, his words felt different. There was a fire in them, something raw and honest. He wasn't just speaking of strength in battle. Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he took another step forward, closing the distance between them. He looked up at Xira with quiet resolve. "Maybe we can't win against the Dominion with just words, but we can stand together. We can fight with everything we have, not out of fear, but out of belief. We can show you that there's a different way, a way that doesn't require domination." Zyra felt a sudden surge of something within her. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was curiosity. And that, in itself, was a dangerous thing for someone like her. She watched him silently for a moment before nodding. You are brave, human, but bravery is not enough. Show me that you can back up those words. Show me that your people can stand as you do. Daniel's lips curled into a small smile. We will, Zyra. Together. And with that, Zyra realized she was no longer facing just another human. She was facing something much more formidable. The possibility of a new way, a new belief. The next morning, Zyra stood alone on the edge of a cliff, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The wind howled around her, carrying with it the faint sounds of humanity's fight for survival. She had heard the whispers of the humans' determination, their refusal to surrender to the Dominion. But now, as she stood there, she found herself wondering something she hadn't before. Why didn't they give up? Why didn't they cower before the power of the Dominion, as every other species had done? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned, finding Daniel walking toward her. His expression was calm, as always, but there was something in his eyes that made her pause. He wasn't just a man. He was a symbol of something greater, something that she couldn't quite understand. I didn't think you'd come back, Zyra said, her voice distant. Daniel smiled softly. I never said I would leave. Zyra's mind churned with questions, most of which she didn't know how to ask. Why was he so unafraid? Why did he have this unshakable belief that there was a way out of this? She had seen countless worlds fall, civilizations wiped out in an instant. And yet here he was, standing before her, asking for something that seemed impossible. She walked past him, looking out over the battlefield. You're different from the others, she said quietly. You speak of change, of belief, but I don't understand it. What makes you think your people will survive? The Dominion is too strong. You cannot fight power with words. Daniel's voice was steady. You think we're just words, but that's not true. We fight with everything we have. We fight with what's inside us. Our will, our resilience. That's how we win. Zyra shook her head. Resilience? She scoffed. You don't know what it means to be resilient. I've seen civilizations destroyed, entire planets turned to ash. I've seen what happens when hope is crushed under the weight of fear. Daniel took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. And I've seen the other side, he said. I've seen what happens when people refuse to give up, when they refuse to let fear control them. Zyra looked at him in silence. The words seemed so simple, yet they carried a weight that made her uneasy. She had lived her entire life in a world where fear was the driving force, where power was the only thing that mattered. But now, here was a human who didn't bow to fear. He didn't even seem to understand it the way she did. How can you be so certain? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. How can you believe that your people can stand against us? What makes you think you can defeat the Dominion? Daniel's eyes softened as he looked at her. Because we don't fight against the strong, Zyra. We fight against the things that try to break us. We fight because we have something worth protecting. You speak of something bigger than power, she said slowly. But I've seen power tear through everything, like a storm that leaves nothing behind. What you're saying doesn't make sense. You cannot stand against something like the Dominion with hope. Daniel's gaze didn't waver. Maybe we can't stand against the Dominion alone, but together, we can fight. Zyra turned to face him, her eyes searching his face for any hint of doubt, any sign that this was just another human fantasy. But there was none. His resolve was unshakable. I don't understand you, human, she said quietly. I've seen the collapse of so many worlds, so many species. But you don't fear me. You don't fear the Dominion. Daniel stepped closer, his voice firm. I don't fear what you are. I fear what you choose to become. Fear doesn't have to define us. It doesn't have to control us. Zyra felt a strange weight settle in her chest. The words were simple, but they hit her in a way nothing else had before. In all her years of conquest, she had never been challenged in this way. It wasn't a battle of strength. It wasn't about who could fight harder or longer. It was a battle of wills, of beliefs. She had built her entire existence on the idea that fear was what made someone strong. But here was this human, this unassuming man, who was telling her that there was another way to live. And for the first time, Syra found herself wondering if he was right. She took a deep breath and turned away, gazing out at the battlefield once more. "I've always believed that fear was the key," she said quietly. "But now I wonder." Daniel's voice was soft, but there was a strength behind it. "Maybe it's time to let go of fear, Syra. Maybe it's time to see what we can do when we choose not to fear." Syra looked at him, her mind swirling with thoughts she couldn't fully understand. The human was right about one thing. There was something more than fear, something more than power. And she couldn't help but feel that, for the first time, she might just be ready to find out what that was. Syra sat in her ship, the hum of the engines vibrating beneath her. The metallic walls of the command room felt colder than usual. She gazed out the viewport, watching the distant stars twinkle like tiny diamonds in the vast, empty space. Her thoughts were far from the beauty of the galaxy. They were focused on the situation at hand. The Dominion fleet was approaching Earth. It had been ordered to strike with full force, to finally bring an end to humanity's resistance. Syra had seen the power of the Dominion many times before. Their ships were massive, their weapons devastating. No species had ever withstood their might for long. The humans, however, were different. They had not surrendered. They had not bent to the Dominion's will. For days, Syra had been haunted by Daniel's words. Maybe it's time to let go of fear. Every time she thought about it, a strange discomfort filled her chest. Fear had always been her weapon. She had used it to crush civilizations. Fear had been the reason she had stood at the top of the Dominion for so long. Without it, what was she? What was her purpose? The door to her command room slid open, and a sharp voice cut through her thoughts. "Commander, the fleet is ready for the final assault," said her second-in-command, an officer named Koreth. He was tall, with dark, reptilian skin and sharp eyes that reflected the cold efficiency of the Dominion. "The humans have no chance. We'll break through their defenses with ease." Syra didn't respond right away. Instead, she stared out the viewport, her mind in turmoil. The fleet was ready. The power of the Dominion was unquestionable. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Daniel's words echoed in her mind. What if we fight with something other than fear? Koreth watched her, waiting for her to speak. He knew something was off. Syra was always decisive, always focused. Today, she seemed distant, uncertain. "Commander," Koreth repeated, his tone more insistent. Syra turned to face him, her eyes narrowing as she forced her thoughts back to the task at hand. "Prepare the fleet," she said, her voice cold and commanding once more. "We move in an hour." Koreth nodded and left the room, leaving Syra alone with her thoughts once again. She walked slowly to the control panel, her fingers brushing the glowing buttons as she prepared to give the order for Earth's destruction. But the closer she came to pressing the button, the more her doubts grew. She had always believed that fear was the key to victory. She had used it to control. She had used it to win. But now, in the face of humanity's defiance, she wondered if there was something more. Was there a way to win that didn't involve terror? Was there a way to achieve victory without crushing the very spirit of those who resisted? Syra clenched her fists as she thought of Daniel, standing before her with no fear, no hesitation. He had asked for nothing more than a chance to prove that humanity could survive, not through power or domination, but through belief in something greater. Could it be that simple? The idea of mercy was foreign to her, and yet, the more she thought about it, the more it seemed to make sense. If humanity could hold on without fear, could they not also fight for something worth preserving? Could they not fight for the future of their species, just as the Dominion fought for the future of theirs? She stared at the control panel, her finger hovering over the button that would start the attack. The fleet waited. Her soldiers waited. The entire Dominion army was ready to strike down Earth, to bring it to its knees. But something inside her said that this wasn't the way. Something told her that fear should not be the answer. Suddenly, the door to the command room opened again. This time, it was Daniel who stepped inside. His presence was calm, as always, and for a moment, Syra felt a strange sense of peace wash over her. "Syra," Daniel said quietly, "I know this isn't easy, but there's another way." Syra looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of frustration and curiosity. "Another way," she repeated. "There's no other way. You cannot defeat the Dominion with words, with hope. We are not the same. You cannot fight us like you fight your own." Daniel shook his head slowly. "It's not about fighting you, Tytigo. It's about fighting for what matters. It's about choosing to stand for something worth protecting. We may not have the same power as you, but that doesn't mean we're weak. We fight because we believe that our future is worth it. And if you can understand that, then maybe, just maybe, you can see that there's another path. One where both of our peoples can coexist." Zyra's heart raced as his words hit her. The Dominion had never considered coexistence. It had always been about domination, about crushing the weaker species under their rule. But Daniel's words were different. They were a challenge to everything she had known. Zyra stood at the edge of her ship, staring at the endless void of space. Her fingers gripped the railing, knuckles white. The command room behind her was silent, the hum of the ship's engines the only sound breaking the stillness. She had given the order to halt the attack. The entire fleet had been prepared to strike Earth, to wipe out humanity once and for all. But she had stopped them. For the first time in her life, she had chosen not to follow through with the destruction. Daniel had left her ship hours ago, but his words still lingered in her mind. "It's not about fighting you. It's about fighting for what matters." The idea of mercy was foreign to her. The Dominion had never shown mercy. They had always conquered, always dominated, always crushed those who stood in their way. Yet now, standing on the precipice of victory, she found herself questioning everything she had ever known. She had never doubted her path before. Power, control, fear, these were the things that had shaped her life. They had brought her to the top of the Dominion, and they had kept her there. Fear had been her ally, her weapon, her way of keeping others in line. But Daniel's unshakable belief in humanity, in something beyond fear, had planted a seed of doubt in her heart. Could it be that he was right? Could there be another way? The stars outside seemed to flicker, like distant whispers calling to her. Zyra closed her eyes, trying to quiet the storm of thoughts inside her mind. She had always prided herself on her strength, on her ability to make tough decisions without hesitation. But now, the decision was far from clear. The door to the deck slid open, and Koreth stepped inside, his tall, imposing figure cutting through the stillness of the room. "Commander, the fleet awaits your orders," he said, his voice sharp and steady. Zyra turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "We're not attacking Earth," she said, her tone firm. Koreth's eyes widened in surprise, and he stepped closer. "Commander, you can't be serious. The humans are weak. We've already defeated their defenses. If we don't act now, they'll only grow stronger." Zyra's gaze softened, but her resolve remained strong. "I've seen their strength, Koreth. It's not the same kind of strength we understand. It's not about weapons, about power. It's something deeper. They fight for something worth protecting." Koreth's expression faltered. He had known Zyra as a leader who never hesitated, who never questioned her decisions. To hear her speak this way about the humans was a shock. "But we cannot simply let them continue. They will never surrender. The Dominion will never let them stand in our way." Zyra walked toward him, her footsteps echoing in the quiet room. "You are wrong, Koreth. They are not just resisting us. They are standing for something. something that we have long forgotten. Koreth's eyes narrowed. What do you mean, Commander? Zyra turned toward the viewport again, her gaze distant. I don't know yet, but I believe there is something more to this conflict. We have always believed that fear is the way to control others. That power is the key to victory. But these humans, they fight without fear. They fight with something more. Hope, belief, a future worth fighting for. Koreth stared at her, confusion clouding his features. You're talking about hope. You think we should spare them because of hope. His voice was thick with disbelief. This is madness. This is not how the Dominion works. Zyra's voice was soft, but there was a quiet power in her words. Perhaps it's time the Dominion changes. Perhaps it's time to stop conquering and start understanding. For a long moment, neither spoke. The tension between them was palpable, the weight of the decision hanging in the air like a storm cloud ready to break. Zyra had never been one to question the Dominion's ways, but something about humanity's fight for survival had made her pause. Daniel's words had sparked something in her, something she couldn't ignore. Finally, Koreth spoke again, his voice sharp. If you do this, Commander, you will be seen as weak. The Dominion will never forgive you. Zyra looked him in the eye, her expression unyielding. I'd rather be seen as weak than continue down a path I no longer believe in. Koreth's jaw clenched, but he didn't argue further. He knew that Zyra was not the same woman who had led the Dominion to victory after victory. She had changed, and as much as he feared what that change might mean for their future, he knew there was little he could do to stop it. Zyra turned back to the viewport, her thoughts drifting to Daniel and the humans. She had never imagined that her greatest challenge would not be defeating an enemy, but understanding them. She had never imagined that a human would change her. The fleet would not attack today, and perhaps in time, she would find a new path, one where fear no longer ruled her decisions. Zyra paced back and forth in the command room, her mind racing. The decision she had made had not been easy. Her heart and mind were torn between the two worlds she knew, the Dominion's way and the new path she was beginning to understand. Every fiber of her being screamed to attack, to finish what had been started. But something inside her held her back. Something about the humans, something about their resilience, was too powerful to ignore. She had never believed in the things they fought for: hope, belief, a better future. The Dominion was built on power, on control. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that the humans didn't fear power. They feared losing what mattered to them. And that, Zyra thought, was a strength she had never considered. The door to the command room opened, and Koreth walked in, his expression tight with frustration. "Commander, what are you doing?" he asked, his voice sharp. "We've been given an order. The fleet is waiting for your command. The humans are already preparing for another strike. If we don't act now, we will lose our advantage." Zyra turned to him, her eyes filled with a quiet determination. "No, Koreth," she said firmly. "We will not attack today." Koreth blinked, taken aback by her response. "What do you mean?" "The order is clear. We need to finish this now. The humans are weak. They have no chance of standing up to us. You cannot let this opportunity slip away." "I won't destroy them," Zyra said, her voice steady but resolute. "They've shown me something that I've never seen before. They are fighting for something, something beyond their survival. Their fight isn't about winning. It's about protecting what matters most to them." Koreth's eyes narrowed in disbelief. "You're saying you will just let them be. You are letting emotions cloud your judgment. You are the leader of the Dominion, Zyra. You cannot be swayed by the weakness of others." Zyra's expression softened as she stepped closer to him. What if their weakness is not something to be conquered? What if it is something to be understood? Koreth shook his head, clearly frustrated. "This is not how we work, Commander. This is not the Dominion way." For a moment, Zyra said nothing. She stared at the cold, metallic walls around her, her mind caught between the weight of her duty and the growing understanding she had of humanity. The Dominion had always believed that the strongest were the ones who controlled the fate of others. But in her time on Earth, she had learned something else. The humans were not afraid of being weak. They were afraid of losing their hope, of losing their future. "I understand what you're saying, Korath," Tyra said, her voice quieter now. "But I'm choosing to believe in something else. I'm choosing to believe in a future where we don't have to destroy what's different from us." Korath stood still for a long moment, his eyes searching her face as if trying to understand the woman who had once been his unshakable leader. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, the comm system crackled to life. Zyra's heart skipped a beat. The humans had never directly communicated with her before. She had always been the one making the demands, issuing the orders. But now, they were reaching out to her. A part of her wanted to dismiss it as a tactic, a trick to buy time. But another part of her, one she had never fully acknowledged until now, felt something stir within her. "They want to meet with me," Tyra repeated, almost to herself. "Yes, Commander," the officer confirmed. "They are asking for you specifically." Zyra turned to Korath, her eyes hardening as she made a decision. "Prepare the shuttle," she said. "I will go." Korath stared at her, stunned. "You can't be serious. The humans could be trying to trap you, Zyra. They could be planning an attack." "I'll take the risk," she said, her voice calm but firm. "This is not just about power anymore. It's about understanding." Korath opened his mouth to argue, but Zyra held up her hand to stop him. Korath hesitated for a moment, then finally nodded, though his expression remained conflicted. He had always followed Zyra's commands without question. But now, seeing her change, he didn't know what to think. He only hoped she wouldn't regret it. As Zyra walked toward the shuttle bay, she felt a mixture of anticipation and fear. The humans were offering her a chance to hear their side, to see their fight from their perspective. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain: this meeting would change everything. The shuttle doors closed behind her with a soft hiss, and as the engines powered up, Zyra took one last look at the Dominion fleet. The battle ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, she felt the weight of what truly mattered. It wasn't power, it wasn't control, it was the future of both their peoples. Zyra sat in the cockpit of the shuttle, her fingers tightly gripping the control panel. The familiar hum of the ship was a constant presence in the background, but today it felt like background noise to the storm of thoughts swirling in her mind. She had never thought she would be in this position, traveling to meet the humans. After years of commanding fleets, after countless battles, she had never considered that a simple conversation could change the course of everything. The stars outside the shuttle's viewport seemed distant, cold, and indifferent. Yet, she felt the weight of every single one of them pressing against her chest. Earth was within reach now, and with it, a chance to finally understand the resistance she had never fully grasped. Behind her, the Dominion fleet loomed in the distance, waiting for her decision. They were ready for battle. They were waiting for Zyra to give the signal, to destroy the human city on Earth and end the rebellion once and for all. But now she wasn't so sure. The communication officer's voice crackled through her earpiece, pulling her from her thoughts. "Commander Zyra, we have received confirmation. The humans are ready for your arrival. They will meet you in the designated area. Please proceed with caution." Zyra didn't respond at first, her mind racing. She could feel the tension in the air, like the calm before a storm. The humans wanted to speak with her. Was this an attempt to delay the inevitable, to gain time for their next move? Or was this something more? She had seen the way they fought, not out of hatred, but out of a desperate need to survive, to protect everything they loved. The more she thought about it, the more she found herself questioning the Dominion's approach. Perhaps it was time to listen, truly listen, to what the humans had to say. The shuttle began its descent, the blue and green of Earth's atmosphere growing larger with every passing second. Zyra felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her focus steady. She had made her decision. No matter what happened, she would not let fear guide her any longer. The humans had earned this chance to speak. As the shuttle touched down on the designated landing zone, a calm breeze swept through the open hatch. Zaira stepped out onto the soft grass of Earth for the first time, her boots sinking slightly into the ground. She could see a group of humans standing in the distance, waiting for her. Among them, she recognized Daniel, the human who had stood before her with no fear, with nothing but conviction in his eyes. Zaira took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. The humans were waiting. She was no longer just a conqueror. She was a leader in search of something. Something she couldn't quite name yet, but something that felt more important than any victory she had ever achieved through fear and power. She walked toward the group, her steps purposeful but cautious. The humans watched her, their eyes full of curiosity, some with skepticism, others with hope. Daniel stepped forward and greeted her with a nod, his expression calm but respectful. "Zaira," he said, his voice steady, "thank you for coming. We didn't know if you would." Zaira paused, standing just a few feet away from him. The others remained silent, waiting for her response. She took a moment to consider her words, then spoke. "I was not sure myself if I would come. But now I believe it is necessary." She glanced around at the group, noticing the quiet strength in their faces. They were not broken. They were not afraid. "I've come to understand that there is something different about your fight. I want to hear what that is." Daniel nodded again, as though he had expected nothing less. He gestured to the group. "We fight for our future. For our families, our homes, our children. We fight for the idea that we have the right to decide our own path, to choose what kind of world we want to live in." Zaira looked at him, her mind turning over his words. The idea of fighting for something other than survival was foreign to her. The Dominion had never been about ideals or dreams. It had always been about control, power, and strength. But here, standing before her, was a different kind of strength, a quiet, unyielding resolve to protect what they held dear. Daniel continued, "We're not looking for war, Zaira. We never were. We fought because we had to. But we want to build something better. A future where we can live without fear, where our children can grow up without the constant shadow of destruction hanging over them." Zaira felt a pang in her chest. For the first time, she realized what it was that had been missing from her own life, a belief in something greater than herself. The Dominion had never given her that. The Empire had always been about ruling, about conquering. But the humans fought for hope. The air around them was quiet, still. Zaira stood among the humans, a group that had fought so hard to survive, to protect their home. She was beginning to see them not as enemies, but as something else, something she had never truly understood. Their strength wasn't in their weapons or in their armies, but in their hearts. Zaira, the once feared leader of the Dominion, now stood at a crossroads. Her heart was torn between the world she had known, built on fear and control, and this new world of hope and understanding that these humans seemed to offer. They had agreed to meet in the open, under the sky, away from the cold metal of her ship, away from the vastness of space. Here, on Earth, they would talk, they would listen, and hopefully, they would find a way forward that didn't involve destruction. Daniel stepped forward, his face calm, but there was a quiet fire in his eyes. He had asked her to sit with them, to hear their plans for the future. Zaira wasn't sure what to expect. She had never thought much about the future, except in terms of victory. But now she wondered if there was more to life than winning. "I'm glad you're willing to listen, Zaira," Daniel said, his voice steady. "We know you have the power to destroy us, but we also believe you have the power to choose a different path. You're not just a conqueror. You're someone who can make a difference." Zaira raised an eyebrow. "You think I can change?" Her voice held a touch of skepticism, but there was something in her tone that suggested she was truly open to the idea. "I've been fighting for so long. I've always believed that power was everything." Daniel nodded. "We all have our reasons for what we do. You've lived a life where power meant control, But we've lived a life where power meant survival. We fought not because we want to dominate, but because we want to protect what we care about. Maybe it's time to consider that there's another way. Syra looked around at the humans who stood with Daniel, men and women, young and old, each one of them carrying the sense of purpose. They were not afraid. They were not trembling before her might. Instead, they stood firm in their belief that they deserved a future, just like she had once believed her people did. Tell me, I understood after a moment of silence, how did you manage to fight back against the Dominion for so long? How did you stay strong when we were crushing your cities, your people? Daniel looked at her, and for a moment, there was a sadness in his eyes. We fought because we didn't have a choice. We fought because our families, our children, our way of life were worth protecting. But we didn't want war. We wanted peace. The destruction, it hurt us too. Sidera felt a sharp pang in her chest. She had heard the stories, the rumors about the damage the Dominion had done to Earth, to the humans. But hearing it from Daniel, hearing the quiet pain in his voice, made her realize something. The Dominion's power wasn't just about control. It had taken lives, dreams, and futures. I'm sorry, she said quietly, though the words felt heavy. I didn't understand. I couldn't see it. The way you see it. Daniel smiled slightly. No one can see everything, Tyra. But that's why we're talking now. To see things differently. To see how we can make this world a better place for everyone. Zyra looked around at the faces of the humans gathered there. They were not defeated, not broken. They had been through so much, and yet they still stood. They still fought, not for dominance, but for something greater than themselves. And now she was beginning to see it. It wasn't just survival they wanted, it was a future. A future where they could live in peace, without the threat of constant war. For the first time in a long while, Syra felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't her usual feeling, the hard, cold certainty of victory, but something softer, something that made her question everything she had known. Could it really be that simple? Could peace be possible? Tell me more, she said, her voice softer now. How do you see this future? What do you want to build? Daniel looked out at the group and then back at her. We want to build a future where we all have a say, where we can work together and share what we have. It doesn't matter where we come from or what we've been through. What matters is what we do now. We want to build something where no one has to live in fear anymore. Zyra's mind spun as she processed his words. She had never considered such a future before. A future where power wasn't the answer. A future where people lived side by side, not as rulers and subjects, but as equals. Could the Dominion, let go of its power and embrace something new? It seemed impossible. But for the first time, Tyra wasn't so sure. I think. Tyra started, her voice quiet as she searched for the right words. I think I want to help. I want to try. The days that followed were unlike anything Syra had ever experienced. The Dominion fleet, once poised to destroy the last human resistance, now hovered in the distance, awaiting her command. But Syra's heart was no longer aligned with the cold logic of war. She had made her choice, and it wasn't just a decision to stop the fight. It was a decision to build something new, something worth believing in. It wasn't easy, not by any means. The Dominion's commanders were restless. Some, like Korath, couldn't understand why Syra had turned away from what they had worked so hard to achieve. The very idea of peace, of cooperation, felt foreign to them, something too soft for the ruthless world they had built. But Syra knew that the old ways were no longer enough. The Dominion's might had brought destruction, yes, but it had not brought the future they all needed. She had learned that from the humans, how they fought not just to survive, but to protect what mattered to them. She had seen it in their eyes, heard it in their voices, and felt it in her own heart. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon of Earth, Syra stood on the bridge of her ship. Her eyes traced the outline of the human city below, now a symbol of the hope they had fought so hard for. She had visited it several times in the past few days, speaking with the humans, listening to their plans for rebuilding, for living in harmony. It was a dream she had never imagined, and yet it was a dream that now seemed possible. Her comms officer's voice broke through her thoughts. "Commander Xyra, we've received another message from the humans. They are ready to discuss the terms of the alliance." Sarah straightened. This was it, the moment that would define everything. An alliance with the humans, not as conqueror and conquered, but as equals. It wasn't just about stopping the war anymore. It was about moving forward together. She made her way to the meeting room, where Daniel and several of his people awaited her. As she entered, Daniel rose to greet her, a smile on his face. "Thyra," he said, his voice warm. "I'm glad you're here." Thyra nodded, her expression calm but thoughtful. "I'm here because I believe we have a chance to build something important." The room fell silent as she spoke. The humans had heard her words before, but today they felt different. This wasn't just a speech or an empty promise. It was a commitment. "We've talked a lot about what the future could be," Thyra continued. "But it's not enough to simply hope for it. We must work together to create it. The Dominion has been a force of power and control for too long. I want to change that. I want to help create a future where we don't need to rule, but we can live as partners." Daniel nodded, his eyes reflecting the same hope that had filled them when they first met. "That's what we want, too. To build a future where no one is ruled by fear, where we can all stand together. It won't be easy, but it's possible." Sarah took a deep breath, then extended her hand to Daniel. It was a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of everything they had gone through. The past, the battles, the pain, it all led to this moment. A moment of understanding. A moment of change. "I am ready to begin," Thyra said. "Let's build this future together." Daniel took her hand, and in that instant, the tension that had once hung between their people seemed to fade away. It wasn't just a handshake. It was a promise. A promise to work together, to move beyond the divisions of the past and create something new. The room filled with a quiet sense of relief, as if the world itself were holding its breath. There would be challenges ahead, no doubt. But Thyra knew that the path they were on was the right one. The old ways had led to destruction, but this new path, this shared hope, would lead to something far greater. As the meeting continued, plans for the future were laid out. The Dominion would slowly begin to withdraw its forces, not in defeat, but in cooperation. Together, the humans and the Dominion would rebuild Earth, share knowledge, and support one another. They would create a world where everyone had a voice, where peace was not just a dream, but a reality. Thyra looked out the window as the sun set on the horizon, the sky painted in shades of gold and orange. She had once believed that the future was written in the stars, that power alone could shape the world. But now she knew that the future was something they would create together, human and Dominion alike. And as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Thyra realized that for the first time in her life, she had hope. True hope. A hope that they could all share. The future was no longer uncertain. It had begun.